I want to ask you a question that Kenny was asked about on Friday. Is a question that, as you know, has come up quite a bit here in Louisville. NIL has changed this a little bit, but I think people maybe underrate still how important the shoe companies are in all of this because of the you're trying to connect the dots between the grassroots and high school scene to the NBA level and everywhere in between or overseas. Louisville, you may have heard this, is not a Nike school. Kentucky is a Nike school. Kentucky is one of the prized clients of Nike in college sports for obvious reasons. Louisville, one of the prized clients of Adidas in college sports, especially basketball, for obvious reasons. He kind of said, look, it's still relationships at the end of the day. It's still, my job to make those relationships regardless. How much do you think that might be a factor? Because it's a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal to not be working under the same umbrella.
It is. I mean, it's a different deal, but I think he's right. I think it is, especially at that level. If you do it right, which I think you will, I think it is more relationships and connections than it is the actual business ties of Nike or Adidas. Where some guys can get into trouble there is where if you're a head coach and you kind of distance yourself from recruiting and you're a little aloof about it. Like if Kenny Payne were to go in there and not be as involved in recruiting as he was here, as some coaches have been in the past, then there could be some trouble because those connections don't exist if he's not going to use them.
Right.
But I think it is more about relationships than it is the business relationships of it. And he obviously, with his life in basketball at all levels, has formed as many relationships as just about anybody in college basketball. I mean, we've seen, and as far as I think shoe companies, it is an important deal, but I think it's overblown to the extent that I don't have the list in front of me, but it's a long one. We've seen guys play on certain shoe company circuits and go to different schools. We've seen guys play on certain shoe company circuits and play on the other shoe company circuit a week later.
Or a day later.
Or a day later. And we've seen guys go to Nike and Adidas colleges and then sign with Under Armour or the other Nike or Adidas, sign with a different company out of college when they started their pro career. So at the end of the day, I mean, those guys are going to go with the best deal in front of them. And as far as recruiting at the end of the day, it's going to be the connections and not necessarily the business end of it. And I thought Kenny's answer on that was great. And he said he was prepped for it by Kenny Klein over there.
That was especially good.
that was good too, but it was a good answer. It was like, he brought up, he mentioned William Wesley by name. And he said, these guys are family. They're not, he doesn't see them as connections. He sees them as real relationships and family and guys that he's known for decades and has had personal relationships with beyond the working relationships. And that's the guys in Nike right now are the same way. I mean, those are guys that I know he cherishes as friends. And if they went to other jobs that were outside of basketball, I'm sure they would still keep up with each other.
You mentioned Worldwide West, William Wesley. We got to talk about DJ Wagner. This is a big onion to peel here because he plays for Purvis Ellison's AAU team. It is on the Nike circuit. Our buddy Kyle Tucker tweeted, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, that John Calipari would drive over Kenny Payne or push him in front of a train was his word. Push him in front of a train. That's a very Kyle phrase. Push him in front of a train to get DJ Wagner and Aaron Bradshaw for Louisville. But let's talk about DJ Wagner because I don't think that Louisville fans, I don't think that they aligned in the Kenny Payne camp or the hopefuls that they would sign Kenny Payne or hire Kenny Payne exclusively to get DJ Wagner because that's kind of short-sighted. But I do think that there is a huge portion of Louisville fans who think because they hired Kenny Payne, well, of course he's going to get his teammate's grandson to come play for him and beat out their arch nemesis for the number one prospect in 2023. What can you tell us about this recruiting process? There's still obviously some time, but we're getting ready now for a big cycle where it's really going to ramp up. And where do you think maybe Kenny Payne and now Louisville stand in that type of a competition?
Well, they stand a lot better right now than they did last Monday or whatever, a week ago. I mean, if Kenny Payne had not gone to Louisville, DJ Wagner, if he played college basketball, which I think he will, was coming to Kentucky. I don't, he visited Memphis. He's visited other places. I'm sure he'll keep it open and listen to people, but there's no other way around that. If he was going to play college basketball, it was going to be for John Calipari at Kentucky. And he still might. And Kentucky might even still be the favorite. It's hard to know right now. But yes, Milt Wagner and Kenny Payne were teammates and have stayed in touch a very long time.
Yeah. And Ben, let me just throw this in real quick. As of today, we're recording this on Monday afternoon, the 21st. There has been a very, 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 very large amount of chatter that Milt will have some sort of role on Kenny's staff, whether that's like chief of staff, advisor, special advisor to the head coach, one of those titles that they just figure out a way to get him on staff. So that could be another element to that relationship beyond being teammates and really good friends.
Yeah, which is exactly what happened 20 years ago when John Calipari hired Milt Wagner to be on his staff in Memphis to get DeJuan Wagner.
Hey,
and you mentioned William Wesley. William Wesley kind of broke into this business. He was buddies with Milt Wagner in New Jersey, and that kind of started all that in motion. And obviously, William Wesley and the Wagner family are incredibly close. Yeah, I mean, you could probably write a whole book about this dynamic about Cal, Kenny, the Wagners, World Wide West. But yeah, the bottom line is DJ, I think, was coming to Kentucky a week ago if he'd gone to college, if he played college basketball. And now it's, neither scenario would surprise me. And yeah, there's been a lot of chatter in just general recruiting circles that Milt could get some sort of director of basketball ops or some other job like that on Kenny Payne's staff, which he's had. Obviously, I mentioned Memphis. He had that job with Cal for several years, and then he was on Tony Barbee's staff after that when Barbee became a head coach at UTEP. So he has a lot of experience in that realm. Obviously, he has the ties to Kenny Payne. We'll have to see how it plays out, but right now the 16-year-old kid's kind of in the middle of
it. My favorite thing was people were trying to predict. Our friend Mike Rutherford was joking about when the rivalry will flip back on. When are they going to call IT and IT will tell them, did you try restarting it? And I would imagine that DJ Wagner's recruitment is going to amp it all the way back up again, because if there's one thing we know, it's that recruiting is the lifeblood of all rivalries. And, Louisville fans have been absolutely itching to have their team be in the mix again for some of these guys. And I think the NCAA stuff did hurt them. It's hard to quantify how much. But I also think Chris Mack's preference to just not really get into these longer running recruitments, and he just wanted, as has been told to me numerous times from people who would know, preferred guys who he knew were going to commit relatively soon in the process, or that they felt confident they could get, and kind of punted on the other guys. And obviously we saw what that resulted in. But yeah, Kenny certainly gives them the credibility again in these recruiting battles to go out and pursue some of these big name players. Last thing then, Ben, well, it's a kind of a twofold question for people who would be interested to know, like, playing style. Kenny kind of talked about it, getting out in transition. I think, anybody who has been in the Calipari coaching tree, we can all be adults here and agree it has not been great when guys go off on their own to be head coaches, but typically would like to play that kind of long, athletic, really difficult to go against man-to-man defense with some shot blocking on the tail end. And try to press a little bit when you can. So we're probably expecting something like that. Do you have any inkling whatsoever of what Kenny's preferences might be in terms of playing style and just kind of attitude and the way that his teams would approach the game?
Yeah, I don't. As far as playing style, I think it's impossible to say right now. Just because, as you said, there's not a large group of John Calipari disciples out there coaching at a high level in college basketball. And the ones like Tony, the ones who are head coaches, Tony Barbie he's a zone guy, and he was killing Cal for years. He was over there on the bench telling him we got to play more zone, and that's not Cal's style. So as far as trying to glean styles from stuff like that, it's going to be tough. It's also tough because the few practices that we've been allowed into over the last few years with Cal, hardly anybody else talks. When the whole team's going, it's Cal's practice. And, there will be obviously stuff off to the side, and Kenny's been, everybody knows his renown as a great coach of big men. That's become a thing over the years. But when they're all going, there's not much chatter from the other coaches. It's really the John Calipari show there. So it's really hard to know. And he's never been a head coach, which I know that's been talked about a lot in the lead up to this hire. And he was mentioned as a possible successor to Calipari at Kentucky had things worked out differently. So the not being the head coach, we just, we have no idea what his playing style is going to be. I think the big thing is what kind of players does he get? Because he is, like you said, he's going to be going after much higher level, higher ranked, at least recruits than Chris Mack was getting. And really even, I think, than Rick Pitino was getting. Pitino got his, several highly touted recruits, but I think there were some people who thought he could have gotten some more highly touted recruits.
A lot of high
profile
misses. Yeah.
The end of his time. And Kenny's going to be in play for a few of those a year, I would think. So yeah, depending on who he gets, I think that's going to be kind of hard to say how he's going to play until we see that. And I do think he spent obviously the last season and a half with the Knicks. So he has some immediate NBA cred there. And obviously the style of basketball in the NBA is a lot different, certainly from what we're seeing at Kentucky and Louisville. And, you watch the NCAA tournament, a lot of these programs around the country. So if he can implement some sort of, more quote unquote, I hate to say it, but modern basketball, it'll be interesting to see who signs up for that.